5 people have been charged with 2 counts each of engaging in organized criminal activity, and all face first or third degree felony charges that can carry sentences ranging from 2 years to life imprisonment. They are accused of running a fraudulent teacher certification testing scheme right here in Houston that utilized a test-taking proxy or teacher impersonator to take the test, along with a corrupt testing proctor to allow the switch between the applicant and the proxy test taker. This was used to certify more than 200 unqualified teachers, all now practicing or having practiced here in our Texas public schools and in districts across the state. Worse yet, the cheating teachers include at least 2 predators who, once falsely certified, had access through their employment to underage kids on campus and off. One has been charged with indecency with a child, another with online solicitation. The 5 individuals charged are Vincent Grayson, the head boys basketball coach at Booker T. Washington, where he's worked for nearly 20 years. He is the kingpin and organizer of this scheme. Tawana Guilford Mason, also charged. She worked at H-Tech, Houston Training and Education Center, where she was the proctor who allowed an impersonator to sit for the exams instead of the actual teacher applicants. Nicholas Newton, an assistant principal at Booker T. Washington, was the test applicant's proxy or impersonator. Darian Nicole White acted also as a corrupt proctor, testing proctor at one of the centers. And finally, LaShonda Roberts, an assistant principal at Yates High School, is charged as a recruiter and referral agent who brought in many individuals who sought the services of the impersonator test taker. This scheme goes back, as far as our investigation can take it, to May 2020, which, as you recall, was right at the beginning of the world shutdown for the COVID pandemic. The extent of this scheme will never be fully known, but we know that at least 400 tests were taken and at least 200 teachers falsely certified. We know that the co-defendants collectively profited in the amount of at least $1 million. You know, the most interesting irony to me in this circle of greed is that in spite of the perpetrators being the type of people that we trust our kids with, educators, it was actually a good Samaritan with a conscience that brought this scheme to light. A former coach applying as a police officer in a different part of Texas had an attack of conscience and came forward with a scheme that was apparently well known among teacher applicants wanting to be certified, and busted this phony test-taking scheme right out of the water.
In mid-2023, TEA became aware of certain irregularities at H-Tech, which is Houston's Training and Education Center. That's an approved location for Texas teaching candidates to take their certification exams. A specific tip, as DA Ogg just mentioned, then followed, put some more meat on the bones, and this investigation ensued. TEA, Pearson, and the investigators soon began to recognize a pattern. Numerous teacher certification candidates seemed to fit the same criteria, where they would drive from far-flung cities, sometimes from Dallas-Fort Worth or farther. Often these people had previously failed 1 or more attempts at the certification exam. They then drove, sometimes 4 or more hours, to the Houston area, and suddenly they were passing the test with flying colors. The tip eventually led to an email address, a Zelle, a Cash App, a phone number, and eventually identified some of the defendants that we're about to talk about. The scope of this investigation has been broad. Investigators have interviewed dozens of teachers, Approximately 20 teachers have cooperated and all told very similar, near identical versions of events. And investigators have reviewed literally thousands of pages of bank records, phone records, etc. As DA Ogg mentioned, the organizer and kingpin of the scheme was Vincent Grayson, coach and teacher at Booker T. Washington. He was able to bribe an employee, Tawana Guilford Mason, at the H-Tech Testing Center. Incidentally, that's a person who's been previously prosecuted for bribery in Harris County 20 years ago in an unrelated case. The way the scheme worked is TEA certification candidates would pay Grayson, usually $2,500. He in turn would forward roughly 20% of that money to Guilford Mason for her willingness to allow the cheating to occur. The candidate would then be instructed by Grayson where and when exactly to test. They would come, show ID, sign in, and leave. A few minutes later, Nicholas Newton, the proxy tester, would sit in their seat, take and pass the test that they felt they could not. On occasion, Mr. Newton would take more than one test. In fact, when he was caught red-handed in February of 2024, he was logged into one test. He said to investigators, "Well, look at the screen behind you," and he was logged in as a different person, taking another test on another terminal that same day. So to summarize these defendants, Vincent Grayson is the kingpin. He's made $1,090,000 from this scheme, as best we can tell. And it's almost certainly more than that because there's cash as well here, which is harder to trace. Tawana Guilford Mason, the testing proctor and compliance certification officer for H-Tech, was paid at least $125,000 by Mr. Grayson via more than 350 separate transactions on Zelle and Cash App. Nicholas Newton, the proxy test taker, was paid over $188,000 from May of 2020 through February of 2024. And our best estimates are that he took over 430 certification tests fraudulently impersonating teachers that paid for those services. As I mentioned, he was caught more or less red-handed, and he gave essentially a full confession. LaShonda Roberts is charged as a recruiter and referral agent who knowingly sent business into the scheme. Records indicate, and the evidence leads us to believe, she sent over 90 teachers into the scheme, and she personally sent over $267,000 to Mr. Grayson, frequently profiting along the way. And finally, the main testing center where this took place, like you heard me say, it was called H-Tech, was shut down in mid-2023 as suspicious activity mounted. Rather than ending the scheme, Vincent Grayson went and found a new location where they could continue the scheme. That's where defendant Darian Wilhite comes in. She was a young proctor working at a different testing center known as Tactics in Houston. She willingly participated and accepted cash bribes in the amount of approximately $250 each time that she let somebody sign in, leave, and let someone test in their place. All 5 defendants face 2 counts of engaging. One is based on money laundering because they profited over $300,000. That is a first-degree felony. And the second charge that each defendant faces is also engaging in organized criminal activity based on tampering with a government document. That's based on the false statements that are made when you sit down and test knowing you're not the person that you say you are. We have not seized accounts, but the investigation is ongoing, and we would encourage anyone who thinks they have additional information to come forward, to contact us or to contact Crime Stoppers and make sure the information makes its way to investigators. Thank you.
Hang on just one second.